Hello, today we're going to be talking about performance tasks and rubrics. We are going to go over the things that we would have done in class today. It's important to note that performance assessment typically requires students to respond to a small number of more significant tasks rather than respond to a large number of less significant tasks. So when we're thinking about the difference between performance assessments and tests, this is where they're putting to use all of that content knowledge to do something that is more performance-based. A performance task is typically a challenging activity given to students in order to reveal their knowledge, understanding, or skills, and to put knowledge and understanding to the test by asking students to produce a product, perform, create, or demonstrate their understanding. It is also a way to ask students to apply, synthesize, analyze, or evaluate new information in new and creative ways. So what are performance tasks? They are more than activities that teachers assign students. They encompass many skills and usually have a direct application to real tasks that people are asked to do in everyday life. Some key characteristics are that students have some choice in selecting the task. The task requires both the elaboration of core knowledge and content and the use of specific processes. Additionally, the task has an explicit scoring system or rubric. The task is typically then designed for a larger audience than just the teacher. So these are the things that we think about when we create that performance task. It is something that has a real-life application. Good tasks need to be engaging and worthwhile for the students. They also need to be rigorous, but the idea of it being an authentic task is also a key. It should be integrated into what the students are doing on a daily basis. The steps that you should consider when developing a performance task is you need to think about what standard or standards and outcomes you want to assess. You then want to select that task or activity which is well matched to what you want to assess. You then want to determine what are the performance criteria to be used in assessing that student performance. You then need to develop a scoring system or rubric to be able to grade student work. And then you want to identify what the level of performance is considered when acceptable. It's often good to highlight the task and rubric in class and provide students with feedback. You will also use that student work to refine the task and rubric over time. The performance criteria is how we define the aspect or aspects of the student's performance that will be evaluated. These criteria should be selected and focus on the most important aspects of the performance and should be clearly stated in the performance criteria and communicated to our students before they complete the task. Some examples of performance tasks can be autobiographies, editorials for newspapers, a display, an expository essay, an interview that they might do, writing a letter to the editor, creating a newspaper article. So these give you some ideas and you can see the real life application of many of these tasks as well. So why performance tasks? A lot of times it's dissatisfaction with only using selected response tests. When we're just asking students to recall information and not use their thinking skills, we find those assessments can be incredibly limiting. Additionally, psychologists believe that students must acquire both content knowledge and procedural knowledge if to have true understanding of the content being taught. They need to be able to apply that content in a variety of settings and situations to show true understanding. Additionally, sometimes conventional tasks or tests, high-stakes tests, can have negative impacts, especially when teachers and students feel that they're just recalling the information just for the test. Some key characteristics of a performance task is students should have some choice in selecting the task, either the person they research, or the setting that they do it in, or the content of which they write about, as long as it fits the parameters outlined by the teacher. The task requires both the elaboration of core content knowledge and the use of specific processes. The task must have an explicit scoring system. Additionally, the task should be designed for an audience larger than just the teacher. That is, others outside the classroom would find value in the work. And last, the task is carefully crafted to measure what it was purported to measure, that what you're asking the students do is aligned with the outcomes and standards of the assessment. So what learning targets will I assess? What are the things you want your students to know at the end of this performance task? What will the students do? What knowledge are they to use? What are they to perform or create? What conditions are they to adhere to? And how much time will they have to complete the task? How many tasks will I need to sample well? How should these tasks differ to cover the breadth and depth of what I'm assessing? And last but not least, by what criteria will I judge the performance or product? What will my rubric look like that I grade the performance task with? So what is a rubric? It's defined as a scoring guide or matrix which articulates the critical dimensions and developmental nature of a process, product, or performance. The rubric informs the evaluator which aspects of performance to judge, as well as the standards of quality expected. We're really familiar with rubrics. You've seen them time and time again in the education department, but this is a way that guides how you're going to teach the performance task and the content, and it also shows the students what the expectation is. The purposes of rubrics, they should be clear enough for everyone to understand. They should clearly define what the various levels of success are. They should be available in student-friendly language. They should include only those aspects of a performance or product that are most valued, and they should align with the standards. Sometimes you may need to provide directions for use. You might have models to illustrate what is meant, and they should contain enough descriptive details. It should be clear how to differentiate between score points. When designing rubrics, it's easy for teachers to know how to assign single grades for complex tasks. We know what an A looks like in our heads, but putting it on paper is another thing. The difficulty in writing a scoring rubric lies in the challenge of describing just what it really looks like to perform well, or better yet, to perform at a variety of levels of competency. So what you're doing when you're creating a rubric is you are actually visualizing what the final product that the students would complete would look like. So you think about what the A paper would look like, and then at each subsequent level, what that would look like by describing it in the rubric. So when you create the rubric, you want to identify the outcomes, performance indicators, or content indicators needed. You want to create a performance task that demonstrates the outcomes or indicators. You want to make a list of what the most important parts of the performance task are and use that list to develop the rubric sections. You want to identify critical attributes of an exemplary performance. You want to describe levels of quality, compare student work in that rubric. You want to establish a level of acceptability, and then have a way to collaborate with students and use the rubric with new samples of student work. When creating a rubric, you must first come up with the criteria that are to be judged after completion of the assignments. So some examples, if they were giving a speech, you might want to be looking at their organization, their research, their opening, and their eye contact. Those would be the criteria of which you would judge them on. And then what would good organization look like, and write a description. What would good research look like, and write a description, and so on. And you can see examples of other ways to create those rubrics. Research papers, you might look at the outline, note cards, rough draft, thesis statement. Those would be the guidelines for creating your criteria in your rubric. There are also a number of different scales that we can use. We can use numerical scales, or numerical scales with verbal descriptors, just verbal descriptors, descriptive scales that are written by the criterion, so minimal evidence, what that looks like, and so on.